I didn't really believe in indie game hype, basically. I didn't really think that indie games could gather that much traction.
We were counting on a few thousand copies maybe that would get sold optimally.
Mhm.
And then we hit the launch button, and in a few hours we were like, okay, guys, this is going really well. I think we will be break even very soon.
For a long time, we didn't really touch the money either. We didn't really know what we should do with it now that we have it.
This is a conversation with Timo, Falcke and Zausch from Toukana Interactive, the devs behind the indie hit Dorfromantik. It's so successful, it even got its own board game, which is also doing incredibly well.
It's really unlikely that you earn good money from board games. Like even less likely than in video games.
When the Dorfromantik board game came out, it already sold much better than usual board game releases sell. It's not purely the marketing, I would say. No, it was more the game itself hit the nail on the head in a way.
They recently released their newest game, Star Birds, in collaboration with the Kurzgesagt brand, which you might know from their animated YouTube videos. I want to talk with them about their game dev journey, how they got here, and we also do some theory crafting about what it takes to make a successful indie game in the first place. I hope you enjoy.
We are now at 8 people at Toukana. We started back in 2020 when we founded the company directly after finishing our bachelor's degree. And then we started in the master's degree program of our university, the HTW, University of Applied Sciences, here in Berlin, and we started at 4. So we were 4 founders and 4 designers, developers at first.
Right, so you started as 4 all-rounders essentially at game school. That's where we met, by the way. That's where I know you from, because we went to the same game school at Berlin. Then you made your first debut game, Dorfromantik, as a university project essentially, right, Timo?
Actually, Dorfromantik wasn't my personal first commercial game. Together with Sandro, one of our other co-founders, I made a game before called Wisp Virtual Spaceport, a VR game, which we also released on Steam, but it completely flopped. That was during our bachelor's degree, actually. And after our bachelor's degree, after another year or so, we decided to give it another try with Zui and Luca together, so a team of 4. And we decided that the master's degree would be the perfect opportunity to give it another try, to make another game, where our goal was to develop and release a game in the first 2 semesters, basically, of the master's, and then write our master thesis about it. That was the plan. And that actually kind of worked out, at least the releasing a game in the first 2 semesters part, because we made Dorfromantik in that time and really released it in early access in about 12 months after.
So you went from nothing to early access in about 12 months.
Yeah, it was probably a bit less actually, because we also had to found our company. We had to get funding from Medium Board, so it was a bit less, I would say, but around about 10 to 12 months, maybe.
Got it. Were you already responsible for marketing back then, Zui? Oh,
yep. Yeah, that's correct. I think because of my background in movies and movie editing, it was kind of a natural specialization or part of my specialization in the team. And I always tried out doing social media stuff also during our studies. So it was a no-brainer that we do it from the beginning on, and that I'm responsible for it. Yeah.
Got it. Obviously, Dorfromantik went quite big. When did it really start blowing up? Was that during early access? Was it already for the early access release? Like when did it explode the way it did?
I would say it really started at the release, early access release, or even I think even our Steam Next Fest before our release was also quite successful already, like from the terms of how many downloads we got, how many wishlists, etc. But then, like right from the beginning, the momentum was really high, and then after the first week, it just didn't really slow down. So
Okay.
it took quite a while for the sales to actually go down again. So that we already noticed in the first week that it would be quite a successful game.
Okay. Because usually what you get is like you get the first day is the best and then kind of tinkers down. And for you, you're saying it went up for like a week or something, and then it only peaked after a week? Or
I would say I think it was pretty consistent actually for the first week. Or I think the peak was probably at the weekend after our release. That was probably the peak when it comes to sales.
That's correct. The peak was at the first weekend, and then it didn't really fall off that much afterwards. So it stayed very strong for quite some time. And I mean, we got very lucky and we had lots of big streamers check out the game, or YouTubers and so on. And that really pushed the game and worked against it falling off of the top seller list and so on. So yeah, that really worked out well.
But I also especially think that we hit it right with the Steam algorithm, that Steam just kept recommending the game for weeks after the release, just because it was doing well and it was received really well. So that was the other part of it.
Got it. So even you would say it wasn't too much marketing magic. It was mostly the Steam algorithm carrying the game, or like what did you do in terms of marketing?
I mean, it's a bit hard to say, but knowing what we know now, it's not purely the marketing, I would say. No, it was more the game itself hit the nail on the head in a way, and people got very deeply into it, you could say.
Yeah.
They were battling others with the high scores and the leaderboards and so on. And so there was a certain hype around the game. And that's something that's really hard to create, I would say. But on the other hand, much earlier, when we released the early prototype on itch.io, we already had a big amount of downloads and activity there. So we already saw that the game had potential in a way. And so that was kind of an indicator maybe, but still the marketing and the effectiveness of the marketing, it's very hard to evaluate in a way.
You had an itch release before the Steam release?
Yeah, like a prototype, an early version of the game. In a way, it was like an early demo, but it was not as polished. Some of the mechanics were a bit different. The user interface is different. The prototype is still there. You can still check it out.
Nice.
We actually made the first version of Dorfromantik during Ludum Dare Game Jam. So it was online from the beginning. It was available from the beginning. But that was our first version of it. That we also submitted for Ludum Dare, and that's the one that we are talking about.
Got it. Yeah, maybe you should backtrack a bit and start from the beginning. Like, clearly it turned into something very big, but did you plan for it to go so big in the beginning? Like, were you aiming that high, or what was your goal when you started out, Timo?
Our goal was actually always the goal that probably most game developers have, that we earn enough to keep making games. That was our goal. So we didn't really plan that farther ahead, I would say. And we calculated how many sales we need to earn enough basically to fund our next game from that. And then we had different options. Either we earn enough to make the next game with additional funding on top, or we earn enough to be able to fund it ourselves. But that was really the upper end of our estimation. So we never expected it to go that high, honestly. And for a long time, we didn't really touch the money either. We didn't really know
what to do with it even. Okay,
now that we have it, and it took some time to realize the situation, that we actually have all these opportunities now, and that we can actually hire more people or even pay ourselves proper wages. That took some time.
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, I can still remember the release day, the early access release day. We were, I don't know, counting on a few thousand copies maybe that would get sold optimally. And then we hit the launch button, and in a few hours we were like, okay, guys, this is going really well. I think we will be break even very soon. And over the first weekend, we knew that we could pay back the median board funding. That was insane. So yeah, it's still amazing when I think about it. I still get a rush. It's really, really crazy. Yeah,
right,
especially as
your first game, right? When you're still very unsure about what's even possible, and then you almost like for Timo, for you, it wasn't your very first game, but it still was probably still exciting to run such a.
I mean, after Wisp and after like it completely flopped on Steam, I didn't really believe in hype, in indie game hype, basically. I didn't really think that indie games could gather that much traction. But also, I mean, we learned a lot about the market since then. Like, we started off as pure designers, pure game developers, and the whole business expertise and the knowledge about Steam and the algorithms and what to expect and what actually means what, that came after some time. Like, we really had to learn what all that meant, basically.
Going back to the beginning, I'm we're jumping in the timeline here a little bit, but you participated in that game jam, and it was relatively well received, and based on that you decided, oh, this could actually make for a good full game, like based on that initial reception you got, or what was the idea behind that? Zvi?
So when we started the project or thought about creating a game company together, we had the plan of creating one game at first to kind of evaluate if we work together as a team in a sustainable fashion, and also if we can manage to have one title that's successful enough to fund future games or future endeavors. And so the idea always was to create a few different prototypes and then evaluate which of them is more or most feasible for a small team of 4 as their first project, and the most feasible. Yeah, that was basically the main criteria, I would say. And then, of course, we also defined a few design pillars, so things we would like to have in games that are Toukana games. For example, a certain minimalism, certain wholesomeness, maybe. Not necessarily lots of violence. We didn't plan on doing FPS games, for example. So we knew we would be in a certain niche in a way. And from all of these prototypes, I think we created 8 different prototypes. One of them was Dorfromantik, and it already was one of the favorites from the beginning on. So we knew immediately that this is one of the better ones, or one of the more feasible ones. Which we could probably get finished in about a year until release. And so after evaluating all these different prototypes, it was one of the 3 most likely to be chosen. And then in the end, we decided on Dorfromantik.
Got it. But the way it came to be was still as a game jam project. So basically you were in a prototyping phase, and then you made this in a game jam and added it to your pool of prototypes, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, the game jam took place during our prototyping phase, so we just took it as an opportunity to make another game.
Awesome. Which other prototypes did you have, Timo? Were there any? I think I roughly remember, but
yeah, I think we also asked you for feedback back then. Yeah, we made like the 2 other favorites were one of them was like a desert sliding game. Now there are a few games on Steam that actually have this as a core mechanic and do it pretty well. So that you slide around like a desert landscape on a hoverboard, kind of. And the other one was a fish jumping game, like where you played a fish and you jumped through different bubbles and got really fast and had to dodge obstacles and so on. So those were the 3 favorites. But yeah, Dorfromantik definitely won in every aspect in the comparison, especially when it comes to completeness of the vision. Like the other two had cool mechanics, like the core mechanics were also fun, but we didn't quite know what the full game would look like if we chose them. So we didn't have a clear vision for the goal and for the game loop. Whereas in Dorfromantik, we already had these quests in place. We already had a game over condition in place in the first prototype. So it made it pretty easy to extrapolate from that and to imagine what the full game could be based on the prototype.
So there were the least number of unanswered questions.
Yeah, definitely.
And that maybe made it less risky than the other options. Got it.
Yeah, but there were many other aspects as well. For example, the name. We already had the name from right at the beginning. And the name was already, like, we felt it was something special. And it was something that fit the game really well. And then the other thing was the setting and the appeal, which we thought even in our early prototype was already there. Like we already had this feeling of like a harmonic, idyllic village landscape, which we built up even further during development. But the idea and the setting was there from the beginning.
Was it already 3D, the first prototype?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool. And if I remember correctly, it's a sort of a mixture of 3D models and billboards that you ended up going with in the end, right? So I think the trees are billboards and the houses are like 3D models, or how does this work? See, you're smiling.
So yeah, I have to smile because that's a thing that many people asked me. Actually, the trees are no billboards. If you rotate the world, you will see that also the small branches of the trees rotate with them. So it's a trickery. So the uppermost part of the tree, like the leaf part, that's a flipped normal mesh. So you actually look inside of the tree. So it looks like a billboard, but it still behaves like a real tree when you rotate around it, because we didn't want to have this cheapish look sometimes billboards get when they rotate, you know? And we also wanted to have the shadows. So it's a very weird solution, I guess. But yeah, that's
okay, smart.
Yeah. And the art style is like a mix of some of the outlines we created with textures. So we used, we generated maps that kind of have like black contrasts on the outlines or on the corners of a mesh. And so we baked these down and then used them in shaders and combined them with normal textures, not normal maps, like with usual image textures, which we painted by hand. And then some of the outlines, especially on rounded objects, are just a simple Fresnel effect.
Fresnel effect? What is this?
In the
you
shader.
Flip
So
the normal and you extrude it outwards, right?
No, it's like in the shader itself. It's just like an overlay that kind of masks out parts of the mesh that look not at the camera, and you can kind of set a threshold. So it's a bit too technical maybe, but it's a mixture of techniques to get these outlines. Yeah.
Did you learn about these techniques during development, or were you already at the very beginning? Oh, you can use this here, we can use that here, or how did that art style develop?
So I'm basically a tech artist, I would say. So for me, many of these techniques I also used during our studies, but some of these things we developed during development and we iterated on them to get a cool look or something that we felt is unique or very recognizable. And we always try to go an interesting route maybe and try out things too. Yeah.
I think Dorfromantik does have a very unique and also strong look. That's definitely one of the strengths of the game, I would say. What would you say? What advice would you give to someone who's like, I want my game to have a cool look? Where do you start with that?
That's a very good question. So we did quite an extensive research into different possible art styles. And what we didn't do that much is actually try them out. So we found a style that fits really early on. And something that was really inspiring were mostly paintings, actually. So we looked at different paintings. Some of them, it's called naive art. It's like paintings of the countryside in a very stereotypical way, not necessarily from big master painters, but normal people. And this sometimes has a really interesting, maybe a bit childish, but fresh look. And we mixed this with expressionist paintings and different art styles when it comes to colors or maybe the outlines. And then we thought about how do we do the shapes and the measures, and we kind of iterated on that, and it kind of came together quite naturally.
Would you say that's generally a good approach that you would recommend to sort of look for inspiration maybe in other media or something, or what would be the tip?
Yeah, I would definitely say that looking into other media and having a good knowledge of other media is very helpful to create something that is fresh or not necessarily has already been seen in the indie space, on the game art style space. Yeah.
Got it. So don't get inspiration maybe from other indie games, because then you'll end up looking sameish. Get maybe inspiration from elsewhere. That makes sense. And going back to the gameplay, so the gameplay was very well defined very early on, is basically what I'm hearing here, Timo, right? So were there any gameplay challenges still to solve, or was it just like, just make the game?
There were definitely some challenges still to solve. What we had from the beginning was the tile placement as the core mechanic. And we had these quests that reward you for assembling your tiles in a certain way. But in the beginning, we didn't even have tile rotation in the game. So you could only place it. And we had like the train tracks were adapting to whatever neighbors they had. So they weren't as restricting, but like changed their direction. And so those are things that we removed or changed from the game. And the quests as well. We, like in the prototype, the quests rewarded you for like every tile that was neighboring counted as one group, basically. There were no edges to connect. But that was also something we noticed about the prototype, that's really hard to read and really hard to control. So we went for this edge approach, that you actually see this edge is a forest edge. So if you connect two forest edges together, then they form a group, and not if the tile just has trees on it. So many mechanics changed in the details, or even like even bigger changes like that. But the core stayed the same. The core, like the general goal, stayed the same, and the general core interaction stayed the same, I would say.
But so, for example, the specifics of how rivers and rails interact, that's something you had to figure out over time? Because I remember there are quite specific rules, right? Oceans can kind of connect to anything, but then rivers can only connect to rivers, and trains can only connect to rails. But other edges, they can connect in whatever way. So I found that interesting, because it feels like the correct amount of restriction, right? You have some restrictions, but you still have a lot of freedom in how to place things otherwise.
Yeah, I think we actually added the lakes and the oceans during early access. I think we didn't have them in the game right from the beginning, but we added them to give even more like flexibility, or tiles that can have multiple neighbors and fit both, basically. So kind of like Joker tiles, actually. And that's what the lakes are in Dorfromantik. But yeah, those are things that we changed over time, or improved over time, iterated on over time. The same goes for the quests, which had many iterations, like also visually, how we present the quest to the player. And even in the first prototype, the quests weren't even anchored in the world. They were just like global quests. So make a forest with X tiles anywhere, or make X forests with this many trees anywhere. And in the actual release version, early access version, we had these quest bubbles floating in the world. and they showed you this forest needs to have these many tiles. Yeah. So there are many changes like that make a big difference, but don't change the bigger picture, I would say. So yeah, it felt like iterating on the prototype and just improving the ideas and streamlining the ideas of the prototype without changing them completely.
It all sounds so streamlined the way the two of you explain it. It sounds so. Yeah, we basically had it all figured out from the beginning, and then we adjusted it a little bit and improved the art a little bit, and then it just ended up doing really well.
Yeah, for Dorfromantik, things just really fit together. Like it went super smoothly in hindsight. How everything came together and how clear our vision was from the beginning. And yeah, that was super lucky for us. Like for a second game, we noticed that it doesn't need to be like that. Like it can, or in most cases, it probably doesn't happen that you, from the beginning, you know exactly what kind of game it will be. But for Dorfromantik, that was pretty much what happened.
So was that based on the idea? Did you just stumble across a lucky idea, basically, a lucky concept?
I mean, we tried to we tried out a bit. We tried all these prototypes, and we also tried to evaluate them based on if they are fit for a commercial game. So it wasn't like completely blind luck. There were some evaluations behind that, and even deciding on the concepts that we prototyped. There were there was some thoughts behind it, definitely, but still, like, just having this mechanic and this good prototype alone can happen, but that it actually is so complete as it was for Dorfromantik is pretty rare, I would say.
Cool. So very much sounds like Dorfromantik basically already succeeded in pre-production. That's really interesting. Zvi, I have a question for you, because I remember this as something that happened and found quite interesting, but never really had the chance to talk about it. And that is performance optimization. I think you guys spent a lot of time optimizing the performance for Dorfromantik, right? Even to the point where you, I think, got a consulting call with some folks at Unity to help you out with that. Can you tell us a bit about that, maybe?
Sure. So for me, performance is a very important aspect of a game. So I was always very, how do I put it? I was always very conscious of having good performance in the game, because I thought back then, okay, the better the performance is, the more people could potentially play the game, and also play it on very low powered hardware, on 10-year-old laptops and stuff, without discrete graphics card and so on. And so when we created the 3D graphics, I was always thinking of ways to solve things cheaply with shaders and without lots of high resolution meshes, lots of textures and stuff. But of course, we were still learning. So something we didn't really know that much about back then was that on hardware like the Switch, for example, the poly count is still relevant. And on PCs, that's not such a big problem anymore. So on PCs, the biggest issue is fill rate of the GPU. And in many cases, that comes down to draw calls, for example. So
fill rate.
Yeah, it's like the how much the CPU can send to the graphics card.
Okay.
And how quickly. I'm also no graphics engineer, so I can't go too deeply into the reasoning behind it. But for Dorfromantik, we got lucky because we optimized many things so that the draw calls weren't as high, but still on the Switch, we had the problem of a high poly count when it comes to the trees, for example. And as the world is always growing, you get more and more objects. So we didn't really have a solution for that early on. If you don't play the game as long, you won't have a big problem with the amount of objects on screen and the poly count, but the bigger the worlds get, the more the performance tanks. And you can still see this on PC. So when people play a world with 1 million points in their high score or higher, you can really see that the performance well, it gets worse.
Right. So the
the
worlds
better the
get
hardware
very,
nowadays,
very big. Yeah, sure.
Yes, exactly. But now as the hardware gets better and better, I think these problems won't show up as much anymore as they did back then, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But on Switch, we had this problem. And maybe Timo wants to say more about that because we found solutions to improve this.
Yeah, actually what we learned during our early access, and it's still funny to me what version we released initially, how badly optimized it was. We didn't know about GPU instancing back then.
Mm-hmm.
So every object, every tree on the world just had its own draw call, basically. And that was the version that we released. And especially when the world becomes bigger, and we don't really have any restriction on how big the world can be, apart from the balancing that, usually like the majority of people won't reach a certain point threshold. But if they cross it, and what the threshold actually is something that we only learned after the early access release. And then it really showed how bad that is, that it's pretty much unplayable at a certain point range. And that was when we learned about GPU instancing, and when we also had this consulting call that you mentioned, because that's what they told us as well. And they showed us examples on how to do it in our case, how we can do it without removing all the randomization that we had in there, because for the visuals, it was important to us that all the colors have slight variations, like the trees.
You have like these gradients in the world, right? Like different biomes that sort of fade into each other. Mm-hmm.
That as well, yeah. And there were pretty interesting technical solutions for that, how we could basically bake the randomization into the mesh or into the object and use GPU instancing to draw all the trees, or at least all the trees of one type or one biome in one draw call. And that was like probably the biggest performance improvement, but also the one that required us to basically rework our whole rendering. So it was quite a lot of effort. And for the Switch version, we noticed that our approach wasn't really that well made, or like that advanced.
Wasn't suitable for the Switch.
Yeah, it wasn't enough for the Switch. For the Switch, as Zui mentioned, there are other topics like the poly count, which doesn't really change when you use GPU instancing. You still have the same topic, so you actually have to find a solution that does GPU instancing, but also occlusion culling, which we didn't have. So our approach was, we fixed the draw call issue, but on the cost of a really high poly count, no matter where you look, basically.
Oh, because you rendered all of the off-screen instances as well, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that's called frustum culling, to be completely correct, though, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so what we had to do, I can remember still, I was on vacation and I came back, and suddenly the solution was to have a low poly version of the already very low poly trees. And this actually fixed so much of such a big part of the problem. So it kind of reduced the poly count by, let's say, a half. And that was enough to get it running okayish on the Switch. So that was lucky, I guess.
Okay. So there wasn't a very expensive fix, was just a different model for the trees, and voila.
Yeah, just like a reduced version of it. Yeah. And then, of course, we removed lots of the smaller decoration and clutter things which you have on the PC, but you don't have on the Switch. So there were still some more things we could do, of course. And we changed the post-processing and stuff to gain back even more FPS. But the biggest change was reducing the poly count of things.
Yeah, I think performance for Switch is a really big challenge, right? From everything I've heard, it's even worse than mobile. Like, mobile phones are more powerful these days. Don't know how this was with Switch 2. Sorry, Timo.
I think Switch 2 is not such a big problem anymore.
Okay.
But Switch 1 was definitely a challenge. Yeah.
What were you about to say, Timo?
Yeah, I think for us, the problem was that we designed the game in a way that it looks really nice, but we didn't really know about all these technicalities back then. And then we needed to rework all the rendering while keeping the visuals the same, basically. So, basically the other way around than you should actually do it. And for example, one other thing that came to my mind was what you mentioned, the biomes. We have biomes with different colors and different meshes sometimes even, and they have transition zones between them. And those transition zones are also quite difficult because they can mix different biome influences together. And there's no restriction on how many biomes can have an influence and which biomes. So that was also something for Switch. I think we reduced it. We made the transition zones thinner. And for certain objects, we turned it off, basically, this blending. So for objects where it wasn't that noticeable, I think for the houses, if I remember correctly, we just turned it off. So that allowed us to still instance them, whereas usually those objects in the transition zones couldn't be batched together with the rest because they have really unique parameters.
So you can't GPU instance those as easily. Which brings me back to the question, like a quick nerd question: how do you do GPU instancing for objects with color variation? Like, what is the solution to that?
I think
shaders.
It was it felt pretty hacky, actually. We had I think the Unity version that we used also didn't have some features that Shader Graph now has, which would have helped back then to make it.
Didn't have instance IDs.
Yeah.
Oh,
so we couldn't per object use an ID as a seed to randomize parts of the colors, for example, or stuff that we put into the shader. So we had to think about ways to create this seed and not input it into the material, because then the material is shared between all the instances. So that would override everything.
But you can, for example, generate a seed from the object position or something.
Exactly this. Yeah. So what we did was we used the height of the object and small changes in scaling in different axes, but such small changes that you don't notice them visually, but the shader can kind of read these. And so we use these as seed numbers in a way.
Okay, smart. I see. Cool. And so you ended up with a very well-optimized game that also runs on Switch really well. But the Switch release was after the early access and so on, right?
Yeah. Actually, we spent 1 year in early access for Dorfromantik. And then another half a year later, we released the Switch version. Together with the Sakura biome, which we also released on PC then. And
I think one thing I remember about Dorfromantik development is also that your 1.0 launch was equally as big as the early access launch, which is something you don't hear that often. Was there anything specific about your 1.0 launch, Zvi, or how did you approach that release?
Yeah, good question. So actually, we didn't originally planned to do an early access, and it was while talking to a friend, head of another studio, before our release, that she told us, why don't you guys just do early access? Because from what I hear from you, what your plan is with updates and everything, that would be perfect as an early access approach. And back then we originally planned, I think, to release in April or May or something of 2021. And there was another game, a much bigger one. It's called Humankind by Amplitude. And it was like a Civilization competitor, but it was also a hex-based grid, and it had like landscapes and stuff. So we thought maybe that's a problem for us. Maybe that's a similar target group. Nowadays, I would say probably not, but back then we were still very cautious. So we thought, okay, they want to release on the same weekend that we want to release. So we definitely should move our release. And so we decided to shift the release to 1 month earlier, actually. And so we thought about, okay, which features can we cut out of the early access version and bring during early access, which then was the creative mode, for example, which was a good move because we had to do lots of performance improvements to actually get the creative mode working. So that really fit together well. And yeah, so we decided to do an early access release and planned on having the full release about 1 year later, and then did a similar marketing campaign and outreach as we did with the early access release. And I think because of the updates and the very active development during early access and not such a long early access, people were still very invested in the game. And yeah, the full release worked really well for us. And we also won awards for the game, the German Developer Award and the German Game Award. And so I think these things all kind of pushed the game additionally.
Yeah, one thing you didn't mention, which I think was really important for that circumstance, was that we actually got a big Steam featuring for our full release. And that was something that we didn't really know about before. So we just learned about that during our early access, how that actually works, that there are these midweek madness or weekend seal featurings, like these pop-up featurings on Steam, which are probably, they're pretty much the best thing you can get because every Steam user will see the game. And that was what we got for our full release because the numbers were so good, the sale numbers, but also the review score. So that's, I think that contributed a lot to the full release success.
Definitely.
How do you think that works? Is there somebody sitting at Steam and just checking all of the numbers, and then they're like, "Hey, do you want the featuring?" Or how does that work? Or did you reach out to them? Or
so usually when a project goes well and it's successful enough, you get a Steam rep. So you have a person that's directly responsible to be there for questions you have, or to be there more quickly than the usual support for developers. And and with the Steam rep, you can talk about these things. You can ask, okay, so is there a possible slot somewhere in the next months, for example, for a featuring? And then they give you options to choose from.
Right.
But I think this depends on the game. So each game is different, has different sales curves and numbers. And the bigger your project is, of course, the more likely it is for you to get these deals because, well, it's also good for Steam. So obviously it's in their interest to push your project when it brings more sales, of course. So, yeah.
Right. So, but they very much do look at numbers, right? So they probably check your stats before they give you a featuring.
Definitely.
And then you had release went really well. You sat on a bunch of money, and then you were like, "Let's grow the team." Did you like hire some new people immediately, or how did things develop from there, Timo?
Yeah, actually, the first person we hired was a community manager because we really underestimated how much effort and like how much activity there would be. And like the first weeks after our release, we were basically all 4 of us were basically full-time just managing the community with maybe some smaller bug fixes here and there, but it took so much time. So that was the first person that we hired. And then it took quite some time actually for us to hire the next person because we were really cautious about growing the team. We were really aware that every new person in the team would change the dynamic a lot. So at first, the only people that we added to the team were a community manager or our marketing freelancer, who we also kind of counted as a team member because he just supported us nonstop during the early access. But they were not really that involved in the actual development. So the first person that actually was involved in development was our programmer, right? Yeah. And we hired him actually even after Dorfromantik, wasn't it?
It was after the release of the Switch version, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So it was in 2022. Yeah,
for the full...
maybe 2023 even. I'm not sure.
So for the full development of Dorfromantik, it was just the four of us as developers, and then we had additional people who were managing marketing and community for us.
But the general hiring strategy, from what I can see, is more on the cautious side and more like
Definitely.
let's stay as small as possible for as long as possible. Got it.
Yeah, the reasoning behind it is we know that the workflow or our way of working works really well for us, and the more people we add, it changes this dynamic, of course. Makes sense, but we are very cautious of changing this or bringing new people into the team. And so we want to hire slowly and carefully so that the team culture and the vibe stays the same, or at least stays in a certain range. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah.
I see. And then obviously before we move on to your next game, which I'm also looking forward to talking about, we also should quickly touch on the Dorfromantik board game, which is also surprisingly successful. Like you see it in every German bookshop wherever you go, like Dorfromantik is in every shelf basically. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so I think actually I was the one first contacted by Pegasus back then. It was not that long after our early access release, actually. From what we heard, the board game authors noticed us during the German Video Game Awards, because they also, like, one of the board game authors also works for a video game company, and they also were participating at the German Video Game Awards. So that's where they noticed us. And apparently they had a prototype for a board game in their drawer, basically, that they never really finished, but that also had hex tiles and placing tiles together as a core mechanic. So what they did was they adapted this prototype to work for the Dorfromantik IP, basically, and asked the publisher, Pegasus, to contact us. And yeah, at first, actually, I didn't see the message because we were just so overwhelmed with all the post-release stuff. But then after some time, after they contacted us again, I noticed, and that was where the conversation started. And for us, like, having a board game from our own game was like a huge, super cool thing, like a really life goal kind of material for us. So we were really, it wasn't a question for us if we want to do it. It was just a question like what exactly that would be and how it works. But then we had a first meeting with the two board game authors, Lukas and Michael, and they showed us their prototype on Tabletop Simulator, and it was really good. Like, it was, we had the feeling that they really nailed it, like really nailed the game feel and transferred it into a board game. At first, we were pretty skeptical that it's even possible, because that in our minds, like, it would be too similar to games like Carcassonne, and also just not that interesting, probably. But they showed us that it actually works really well, and they made this cooperative experience out of it, which we also thought was a really good idea, because that keeps it in this same vein of having a relaxing experience together instead of like a conflict and confrontation. Yeah, so they really convinced us with their prototype, and we still thought, we never expected it to be like a big financial income for us. Like, we thought, yeah, that's super nice, like a super cool thing to have. But from what we heard, it's really unlikely that you earn good money from board games, like even less likely than in video games. So we didn't really expect anything. But after time went on and the development of the board game progressed, there were signs that it would actually, that like the big topic for board games is always the award, the Spiel des Jahres award, which is really different than awards in video games. Video games, players don't really care about awards in our experience.
Yeah,
but
I think that's true.
In board games, it's like a huge sales multiplicator to even be nominated for this award, because there are so many families who just buy the Spiel des Jahres every year, for example, or even just look at the list of nominees, and that's basically the pool of games that they choose from. So, and we managed to get into that pool and then even won the award. And then, that was how it changed from being a super cool passion project to an actually successful game that that also is a big pillar for us now, for our studio.
Got it.
Actually,
you don't have to give any precise numbers. I understand that you can't, but like in terms of percentages, what we say roughly, what share of revenue does come from board games now?
You mean
when you compare Dorfromantik digital versus Dorfromantik physical?
I think Timo even can give you some more.
We do have
concrete info on that.
We have a graph somewhere. I just don't know. From what I remember, it was like maybe a fifth of our income.
Yeah.
That's quite significant.
It's significant,
Yeah. I mean, that's already, and like the release year of Dorfromantik was different, but now in the long run, I think it's maybe 20%, maybe.
So board games do also have a decent tail.
Yes, but I would add one thing. So when the Dorfromantik board game came out, it already sold much better than usual board game releases sell. And so even before getting the nomination, we heard from the publisher that it's going really well, and this is unusual. And then the nomination came, and it got better, and then it won the award, and it got even better. So it's very rare that a board game does so well. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with saying, yeah, sure, if you do a board game of your game, it will be a super lucrative thing.
It's very rare.
I can't really say this, so I think we got lucky in a way. Because it just worked out really well.
It all came
but something
down to
else that we
concept.
really, right, that's correct. But something else that was very important for us was to keep the visual and the art style of the board game very congruent to what the video game looks like. So if we wouldn't have taken control there and really had protected our Dorfromantik vision in a way, I think the game would have looked much more typical of usual board game releases. And I think that would have probably not really helped the game.
The board game, I was about to say, it looks very strong as well. Like just like the digital version of Dorfromantik really stands out with its look and feel. I think the same is very much true for the board game. It very much stands out among, like, if you I think that's maybe one of the reasons also why it's doing so well, right? It has that standout factor if you look at it in a shelf of games. Do you have any other theories for why the board game did so well?
So from what I heard or what I know now about the board games industry, there's many mechanics that keep being reused in games. So new games are usually familiar because they basically assemble existing mechanics in a different way. And Dorfromantik made something new in that it had this campaign structure, like kind of similar to legacy board games, but repeatable, so that you don't like destroy any of your materials or so on. And it also works with a different, like, you don't need to be in the same group of people every time. It gives you a lot of incentive to keep on exploring and adds new elements to the game as you learn the game. So I think that mechanic was really important. And then the rest, like the core of the game, is just super accessible as well. So it has this puzzle making a puzzle kind of vibe. And works for all kinds of people, like families, children, whatever. But also has this, like with the campaign and all the additional rules being added on top, it has the depth that you can get into it a lot if you want to. So you can optimize a lot if you're into that, but you don't need to.
Right. Also, it starts out very simple, and then because of the progression system, you get more materials, more rules, more complexity over time, right? Is actually I've never gone too deep into the digital version of Dorfromantik. Is that's something you do in the digital version as well, right? Where you unlock new tiles and new complexity, or
yeah, actually, in the digital version, we always stayed true to our core and never really added that many rules on top. So we had all these ideas as well, but since the game worked so well and was received so well, we didn't really dare to change the core rule set of the game. So there aren't, while you do unlock a lot of tiles, they're all just cosmetic, basically. So the game rules don't really get more complicated. Luckily for us, the game rules at their core are already have this potential that you can play really casually, but you can also really optimize and maximize with the perfect placements and all types of or all kinds of planning ahead that you don't do as a casual player. So the core gameplay still has the same appeal, I would say, but we don't do what the board game is doing in adding tons of rules on top.
Interesting. So in a way, the board game is more complex than the digital game in terms of rule sets.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, and the balancing had more challenges maybe. The digital game is balanced in a different way. Yeah.
Sure.
If we would have added much more of these additional tile mechanics, let's put it like this, it would have changed the balancing so much. And as we had to tune the balancing quite minutely to actually get it to work well with the randomization of the tile generation and stuff, it took some time. And so maybe that was one of the reasons why we were so careful of not adding too much.
It was already very fine-tuned and you didn't want to feel like messing with the balance there again. I see that. So, Kurzgesagt game. Did they find you in a similar way to the... Did they find you or did you find them?
Yeah, so they approached us first. It was during Gamescom when we showcased the Switch version of Dorfromantik, the first Gamescom after the pandemic. And they back then were just scouting for teams, basically, like for potential partners that they could make a game with together. And that's how we got in contact. So they told us that they really enjoy Dorfromantik, that they really like the game, and they would be interested in also making a game or even anything in that direction. And we're just looking for teams who would be interested. And for us, that was the time where we just finished the full release Dorfromantik. We finished the Switch version, and we had to decide what to do next. If we want to do more Dorfromantik or if we want to start a new game. And after some time, we decided we want to start a new game. We had enough Dorfromantik for now. So that's when we came back to that conversation that we had on Gamescom, and we decided that it can actually work, like timing wise for us, and that we would be interested in making something together. Like we knew them for a long time, we knew their videos, and they also knew us from Dorfromantik. So the chemistry was there from the beginning.
Got it. Are they also Berlin-based, right?
No, they are in Munich.
Okay.
But they also have some people in Berlin.
Got it. Cool. So they already had the idea of making a video game, and they were actively scouting for teams, and that's how they found you. Got it.
Yeah, so at least they had the idea of getting their toes into the video game sector.
Yep.
It wasn't clear yet if it would be with a completely new game or there were many options, but that's what it ended up being. Yeah.
Yeah, and originally, the first time we talked to them on Gamescom, it was they were actually looking, or they actually planned to create an in-house team of developers and make their own game.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked and searched for people to talk about, or for people to talk to and just share knowledge and experience, and and then this kind of evolved into we could also do something together. And then when we decided that we would like to see if we work together on a project, we then got back to the drawing board and we started working on a few prototypes, similar to what we did with Dorfromantik.
Okay. So that's different gameplay prototypes, trying out a bunch of different ideas of how a Kurzgesagt game essentially could look like. Did they give you a couple of themes, or was it very free prototyping?
It was a really free prototyping phase again. The only difference was that we also took inspiration from the videos. So just when it comes to topics and themes or mechanics even that we could make into a full game, we looked at their videos, and for some of our prototypes, that was the origin, basically. For example, for Star Birds, they have a video about asteroid mining, and that was really clearly the inspiration behind the game that we actually went for.
What do we say? How involved were they in the process, in the early process? Did you show them the prototypes, or how did that collaboration look like?
So in the beginning, we took a few months, Timo, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, to build these basic prototypes and then to kind of loop back through them and improve some of them. And in that time, we already discarded a few of them because we felt like we didn't really find a good carrying core loop or something that we felt very comfortable with to work on for a longer period of time, or we didn't see the market appeal, Yeah. So we were a bit more critical maybe even than we were back when we built the Dorfromantik prototypes. And then we chose, I think, 3 of these prototypes, and we pitched them to kind of decide on what to move forward with together. And that was the asteroid mining prototype, and there was another one which was more like a roguelike deck building strategy thing that wasn't really that clearly defined yet. And then we had something that was a bit, if you think back to the early parts of Spore, don't know if you remember that game, Jonas, or if you know it.
Spore, yeah.
There was this phase, this early starting phase where you're still the blob and you need to fight against the other blob-like beings and kind of consume them and add more parts and so on. And that was kind of something we felt was pretty cool and could also work in the Kurzgesagt visual style in a way. Yep. But that was also not that thing that we decided on. And yeah, they were very hands-off because we always said if we do something together, game design needs to come first. That's the priority, to have a good game where we feel comfortable with. And so we were very focused on doing these prototypes and finding a good core mechanic, a core game.
And then you once again ended up going with the prototype that firstly sounds like it was the most well-defined, right? It had the least open questions.
Yeah, it seemed like that to us. But during development, we noticed that it's not that well-defined that as we thought it would be. In our first prototype, we had basically this asteroid theme. We had the pipe drawing, we had building placement, and we had the idea that it would be like a factory building game that you have production change with resources flowing through. And that felt like a pretty clear vision. Like factory building game, but with this 3D gameplay and also like a more casual approach to it, more colorful, less technical. Yeah, but there were so many unanswered questions that we had to solve still during our development. That's why the project also took longer than Dorfromantik.
But also the scope, like from the outside perspective, it looks like it's much bigger, more complex game in terms of features that it has, right? Because you have all of the infrastructure on the asteroids, then you have also ships flying from asteroid to asteroid. Like they're like 2 layers of games almost stacked on top of each other. So all in all, just more.
More in everything. More in
everything. Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, when we look back, we're like, oh my God, how did we not see this? But
especially,
that's how it is.
Especially because that's what all people warn you about, that you need to be careful that you don't overscope on the second project. That's what every team does basically. After you have one successful game, you decide, well, let's step it up a notch. And we stepped it up quite a few notches, I would say. And also, I mean, we had this really unique opportunity of having Kurzgesagt on board. And that's also one aspect that convinced us to try even more things. Like, we would never do a game with cutscenes if we didn't have Kurzgesagt on our side. And we probably wouldn't have done a narrative like storyline either, because that's not really, like, Dorfromantik obviously doesn't have any kind of storytelling. Star Birds does. And that's one of the aspects that we decided to do, because we knew that that's what Kurzgesagt can do well and what they can contribute. And we want to use this opportunity that we have with this game.
Got it. Which parts did they contribute during development? Did they contribute in terms of art and cutscenes and so on, or what did they do exactly?
Yeah, so from the beginning, it was clear that the game design and game development is ours, basically. It's our responsibility. And also we are the ones who have the decision power when it comes to those things. And same goes for like the actual, like the visuals when it comes to what works for the game and what works in 3D. So at the beginning, their main focus was that they need to make sure that it fits to their brand, so that they have like basically a word or a saying when it comes to the overall look of the game, that it looks like it would fit into their Kurzgesagt universe, and also everything related to texts and wording. So to give an overview, I would say we were responsible for game design, game development, the whole technical side, the artistic side, in what the game looks like, and also everything that we knew from earlier, like marketing for PC game publishing and so on. And their role was like keeping the brand identity, doing research for us, writing a lot of the texts that we have in game, and also what actually became bigger than we originally thought was that they produced many art assets for us. Like pretty much everything in the game that is 2D comes from them.
Nice.
And most of the animations also are theirs. So, for example, the buildings that we have, Luca and Sui made the concepts for the buildings and made the 3D models for them. And then they added animations for them, because that's something that they are really good at and really quick at. And then the obvious plus thing is marketing. Like they have this huge marketing reach, and from the beginning it was clear that that is like a big potential that they bring to the table when it comes to games.
Zvi, did you do tech art again for Starbirds?
Yeah, especially in the first year when we were still kind of iteratively working on the art style. So we knew early on that what's very important with this project is to get a 3D style that looks similar to the 2D vector style in their videos, but also needs to work in a context of a 3D game. So it's important to have the shapes and the colors and everything look similar, but still you need to be able to see the depth, right? That's very important. You can make 3D look totally flat, but then you can't really see the surface of the asteroid, for example. So these were things we kind of had to experiment with and actually find something that works. And that took quite a lot of time. So that was lots of shader work, also trying different types of meshes, sizes, and setups. And so the asteroids are kind of a semi-procedural approach. It's basic meshes we use and we generate with a Blender. And then Timo took them and wrote magic code that kind of changes them into real-time generated meshes in Unity. So we can have plateaus on the asteroids. We can add the craters and stuff. So it's the technical setup is much more complex than what we had with Dorfromantik as well. And so I did lots of tech art. And then over the 2 years, the closer we came to the release, the less tech art work there was necessary. Of course, there are still parts of the game where I need to do stuff, but I also do the audio direction, for example. So many different aspects that then I shift my focus on.
I see.
Yeah.
For the tech art, is the workflow almost sounds a bit like some variation of prototyping, what you described there, right? So you basically just open a new Unity scene maybe and try to get the look of one asteroid, right? Or how does that process exactly look like?
Yeah, well, that's kind of how we did it. We had like a visual prototype, which was detached from the game mechanics at first, just to see how can we actually create something that looks similar to the 2D vector style. And then we started kind of combining it together and see what actually works and what doesn't work. So there were many things we had to do to kind of improve on the basic setup to actually make it work in a gameplay sense and also make it functional. And then, we created the buildings and all of the 3D assets. They created some animations for it. Then at some point we decided that the birds themselves will have a bigger role in the game. So they will be the crew that kind of takes you on the journey through different star systems and so on. So we also had to think about, will they only exist in the cutscenes, or do we actually also want to have them in other parts of the game? And so we decided on dialogue segments and also having the birds comment what you do and, have like small profile images, but we wanted to have them animated. So you have to think about, how can we actually do this? Do we use animated sprites? Okay, then we need to think of having 6 different characters. And if we want smooth animations, then you need 60 FPS animated sprites. And then, you have, 6 or more different emotions. And you would also like to have them blend into each other. So maybe a 2D sprite animation isn't the thing you need. So we thought about ways to create these birds in a smarter way. So now the birds are 2D shapes in 3D rigged to a rig. And this then gets animated. And so we can use animation blending for all the things the birds do.
2D
and
mesh.
so all of these things are things you could have never imagined in the beginning of the project. And these are the things that make it so much more complex and challenging. So there's lots of tech art in there. Yes.
And from the gameplay side, the complexity was like the complexity of there being basically 2 gameplay layers on top of each other. Was that planned from the beginning, or was that something that evolved over time, Timo?
It was planned from the beginning, but it wasn't as clearly defined. So, I think there are a bunch of aspects that make the game design or the game system complex, actually. And that is one part. But like solving the interplanetary transport was just one of the many aspects that we had to figure out. One other thing was like this whole resource economy that we have. I honestly underestimated how much effort it is to design a resource economy with like 50 to 100 resources that all kind of make sense together, and also that can be introduced one after the other. Like you don't start off with all the buildings, so you can't just have one system of resources, like one graph basically, how you can craft everything. You need to decide, or you need to figure out at this stage of the game, what do you have available, and does this feel complete and is fun to explore? That was a different aspect. And then also like the general game loop was also something that we took some time to actually figure out, like what the goal would actually be, and if you could actually lose the game. At the beginning, we still had a few ideas of how we could make the game losable.
Okay, and it's not losable anymore right now.
It's not losable anymore because in the end, most of the ideas that we had resulted in time pressure, basically, in some way. And yeah, that's something that we decided on at some point, that we don't want there to be any time pressure in the game. We want it to be a relaxing experience and more like lean into the puzzle kind of challenge that we have in Dorfromantik. That you have this environment, and your challenge is to figure out how to fit everything in this environment and how to connect the pipes and the buildings together so that in the end everything works like a machine.
Right, so it's kind of a logistics challenge.
Yeah.
To build more and more complicated factories as you progress through the game.
Yeah, but this whole system, or this whole layer on the game with the quests and goal and like progression, how you earn your buildings, if something costs something or not, all of that was something we had to figure out during development.
Did you play some factory automation games for inspiration, or where did you?
Yeah, we definitely checked out the bigger ones, like Factorio, or there were also other ones that are not as big, but more similar in regards of casual factor or aesthetics. So we definitely checked them out. But I would say none of us is like a super fan of the genre.
Got it. So you kind of turned it into your own thing. Yeah. So. But now that I think about it, like games like Factorio are also not really losable, right? Maybe if on hardcore or whatever, but like if you play it normally, they're not really losable.
Yeah, actually, a few of them weren't losable at first, and then after some updates or after some time, they introduced like an enemy that can destroy your buildings. But yeah, it's probably still not really losable. It's more like a constant pressure you face that you have to fend off. Yeah. But I think this type of game also, like, you don't want to lose in a factory building game where you spend all this time building up a huge factory. If there was something in there that just makes you go game over and you lose all your progress, that would be like the most unsatisfying thing ever, I think. So it's more like a matter of pressure and tension that is added in some of these games.
Yeah, it's more also like an optimization challenge. And I think a lot of the satisfaction in factory builders comes from maybe, for example, building things more efficiently than others or something. I think that it's cool. And when there's some show-off potential, like in Factorio, the people who like show off their perfectly organized factories. Do you have something like that for Starbirds? Like some show-offs showing off their insanely efficient creations, or like what's like the community dynamics that evolved for this game?
So it's layered.
Okay.
Some players are very focused on optimization, and also during the demo period during Next Fest, some people really min-maxed the 2 or 3 levels we had in there and got to very high scores. So it's still something we also thinking about. What type of additional modes could we add to the game to give those type of players even more freedom and more space to really go deep into this min-maxing?
How do you get score
Currently,
in Space Birds?
Yeah. Currently, you have like an efficiency score. So the more resources you deliver to the main station, you get a score for it. And if you deliver a certain amount of resources in a good distribution, please correct me even more, Timo, you can explain it better, I think, than me. The better your final score at the end of a sector or like a level is.
Yeah, so the score is something that we also developed during development. So we came up with it because we noticed what actually is the thing that you can optimize. And the thing is that we decided on was like the rate of resources that's delivered to your space station, but also the mix of resources, that you don't deliver like just one resource, but distribute your economies so that it produces and delivers all resources in a certain amount. And that's one part of the score. The one part where you can actually, I would say, the trickier part of the score to solve. And then the other part of the score is we have the system of module quests, is what they are called, where you basically every module quest represents a new resource that you have to produce. So, and every completed module quest also gives you 1 score. So that's the part of the score that you can complete by just producing every resource once, or for the amount of times that you need for the quest. But that's just a matter of time, basically, or of completion. Whereas the other one requires you to build up your whole infrastructure in a way that it is coherent and has this end result.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's how the
is the score deliberately also not time based? So if you want to optimize your score, you're not under additional time pressure because of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because we wanted to keep everything more or less chill. We know that some people still get a bit stressed out, maybe, or at least feel some sort of a pressure to achieve what the quests ask from you. And adding additional time pressure for us that didn't feel right. So, yeah.
Right. You didn't want people to optimize the fun out of their own experience by optimizing for score.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Actually, we have one single achievement at the moment that is a time-based achievement.
And
it's the most hated one, definitely.
Yeah, it is. Interesting.
Yeah. So there are, and I can understand. I feel the same way. I think in Islanders you also had this one time-based.
Oh yeah, it was not people's favorites. You're right.
I never completed that one.
We should have learned from you.
And for Star Birds, you're also doing early access at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. What's the reasoning for that, Twee?
So, I think it's familiarity to this release model in a way, because we did it back when we released Dorfromantik, and we felt that Kurzgesagt brings this huge community with them, right? And for us, it was a bit difficult to maybe gauge at first, what do they expect from a game? What do they actually want from a game? And so we felt like it would be a good idea to actually give them a voice and listen to their feedback. So an additional reason to do early access for us. And also we feel that if you do a good early access, then it could play out like 2 releases, like the early access release and the full release. So we get 2 of those release peaks or release marketing beats we can do. And so it felt like an ideal choice in a way.
If you get lucky with that one again. But I think from what I can see, let me quickly check out the Starbirds Steam page, but I think it's also been doing really well so far, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad release.
Okay, yeah, it looks quite solid. I'm not sure if it's quite Dorfromantik numbers, but it's looking very, very solid. Cool. So what are your plans with Starbirds moving forward?
We have a bunch of options, and since we're not alone in this, we still need to basically discuss what path we take. So yeah, there are many options and many ideas floating around, but we don't quite know yet what exactly the path will be for Starbirds.
What have you gotten?
What we definitely know already is, sorry, I'll just add something. What we definitely already know is that we, of course, want to continue the story campaign. The scale of that is not too clear right now, so we know that there will be another star system added. There will be more cutscenes. We will try to, finish the story at some point. And then we are also thinking about possible modes or things we can do with the game play and the game loop. We already have these small bonus levels in the game that most people miss, I think. So we can improve on actually playing those and finding those. And also we want to give players that long for more or maybe a bit less of the hand holding through the story campaign to find a way to offer them that. So yeah, but the exact way of how we will do it, it's still in discussion in a way. Yeah.
So, but you said that you were interested in seeing how the community reacts and maybe adjusting course depending on that a little bit. What has been the feedback from the community so far, or like what do you feel are their pain points, Timo?
I mean, there were quite a few points where the instructions weren't as clear as they should have been, I would say.
Okay.
And then because of the technical base, there's a lot of potential for issues with certain generations, for example. So that's one of the parts that we want to solve. Apart from that, I think most people just want to have more of the game because we have this campaign now. And as soon as you're finished with the campaign and maybe even with the achievements, then there's not really much else to do. And I think that's something that we definitely have high on our priority list to give players more to experience.
So that means you'll have to add even more resources to the already large pool.
The funny part is that I think in our initial system, we already had like 80 resources, and the early access version already only contains like 40, like maybe half, maybe a little bit more. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, we still have a lot of resources actually that we haven't put into the game yet. So we don't have to come up with like. Not everything has to be completely new, luckily. You have some things already prepared. But
also more buildings will get added, right?
Nice.
There's some buildings that aren't yet in the game.
Yeah. But other interesting parts, like there are some wishes in the community that are super interesting to us because they would require some new game design solutions. And we have some ideas on how to tackle those. Like, I would say the most requested things definitely are on our radar. And we still, we will try to find ways to solve those requests in a way that also works with the game.
Good. Are you already cooking some new projects, or are you, just released into early access, right? So you're probably still full on board with Starbirds?
Yeah, it was 3 weeks ago, I think, our release. So there's still a lot to do, like even just bug fixing and general improvement, but also working on the new content. So Starbirds still has quite a few challenges up ahead, I would say. And what comes after that, I think now with Starbirds, that just means that we have even more opportunities now, even more things we have to decide between. we already had that for Dorfromantik, like all the things you can do with a good game after it's finished. But yeah, of course, at some point we also want to do something new again. So,
sure, that makes
but
sense.
the timeline is not decided yet.
Zvi, I think you also were one of the games that moved your launch date due to Silksong, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Would you, in hindsight, say that was a good decision, or would you have done things differently? Or what's your thoughts in hindsight?
I think it's a good decision. I think it took us a while to decide, a few days actually, but I think it's a good decision in the end. So we were at Gamescom when we actually revealed our original launch date. On the 21st of August, we revealed that we want to launch the game on the 4th of September. And on the same day, they released their launch date trailer or launch date info. And we were like, oh my God, what is happening? And then we did some sort of a deep dive into researching what kinds of releases will come in the next weeks and so on, to kind of evaluate if we should move or if we should stay there. And as Silksong was the most wishlisted game globally back then, with I think 3 or 4 million wishlists, which is totally insane, we thought that it might be a good idea to get out of the way, especially since the whole press and influencers, YouTubers, streamers, we felt like a huge part of them will do content about Silksong. And so yeah, we looked at the following weeks and we decided the week after is a better spot to release. And I mean, in hindsight, it's you can't really say if it would have gone worse if we would have stayed on the 4th of September.
Yeah.
But I feel that it was a better decision because we had a bit more possible coverage in the week after.
Got it.
And so I think it was an okay decision. At least we stand behind the decision.
Yeah, I see. But you're also not completely butthurt about it, of like, how dare they just drop the trailer upon us? Because I think
there was some sort of a controversy about that. Yeah,
I remember.
I was in an article about the price.
Yeah.
And I said that the price discussion in light of the Silksong price of around 20 euros or $20 is of course a hard fact and something that also informs where you position your own games, right? And so yeah, that was an interesting discussion, and some people changed the narrative of that article. So there were copies of that article coming out in different outlets, where the narrative now was that indie developers criticize the pricing of Silksong because they feel like it's too cheap and they have to make their own games cheaper and stuff. So yeah, that was an interesting take.
Right. But, so they maybe twisted your words a bit, or what do you mean?
Well, not necessarily my words, but it's like they made a narrative.
I mean, there are probably some indies who feel that way, for sure.
Oh yeah, sure. And to a certain extent, I can understand it, but I also understand the players who say, well, if this amount of money is good enough for you and it is a good value proposition for me, then why should you make your game more expensive?
Sure.
I also understand this.
You can also understand Team Cherry's perspective as well. I feel like, honestly, $20 is probably a very well optimized price for the game, because it's makes it kind of into a no-brainer to purchase.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And a no-brainer price is something you should always try to opt for.
Yeah.
For Dorfromantik, for example, I think we undersold it a little bit, but that was a really good decision for the pricing because it was a no-brainer at some point.
I agree. Cool. Do you want to engage in some theory crafting about how to make like successful indie games in general, or is that something you don't entertain so much?
Yeah, let's try.
Let's do it.
Like after making 2 fairly successful indie games, first question would be: do you think it's actually reproducible, Timo?
So in generally, I would say we always try, or we never claim to have a formula of how to make a successful game, even
Fair.
after 2 games, because the circumstances are so different. So yeah, I think we definitely learned quite a bit, and we look at prototypes and look at new games differently now. I think our decisions are better now. Like, we can better decide on if a game has potential or not. But I think it's really difficult to take the lessons from one game and reproduce it with a completely different one. We already had this experience with our 2 games, even from the same studio, from the same team, basically. Even there, it's not really reproducible. So it's even more difficult when it's a different team with different people.
Okay, that's a fair point. But also, you made 2 very, very different games. Would you say it might be easier if you made like more similar games? Like, for example, you made, I don't know, a more Dorfromantik inspired game. Would you have been able to take some learnings maybe from the first one?
I think that would definitely be the safer choice. Like, if you're struggling as a company, and if you have one successful title in your disposal, then it's definitely the smarter choice to lean into that and make more of that. But in our decision was based on the fact that we actually, with the success of Dorfromantik, we kind of earned ourselves the freedom to do something completely different.
Sure.
And we have the means to carry the risk, basically. But it was definitely not a decision made purely for the business side. Yeah.
Got it. So do you feel like the art styles make a big difference in which games succeed nowadays, or what would you say are like if you browse random games on Steam that maybe aren't released yet, and like what are the things that make you go, that's probably gonna do well?
That's a big question. So I'd say it's that you could approach this in 2 different ways. One way would be what I would have said 1 or 2 years ago. The more visually appealing something is, the cleaner, the more easy to read or grasp what the game is about, the better it will do. But now we also see lots of games that are optimized for streaming, or games that are optimized for a very big hype phase, that don't necessarily need to look super polished and are mostly about the recognizability, maybe. So I think it's a more layered thing. You can't really have a generalized answer to that. But still, of course, if your game is visually appealing and very polished optically, then I guess more people will click on something, or at least you will have more attention for it in a way. Yeah. I think that's still true. But if your game is very recognizable and maybe especially trashy, not in a derogatory way, right? Like, I'm not trying to put this down in any way. I think that's a very viable tactic also, or a very, very, very viable approach. Then you can also get lots of attention with that. I think nowadays the biggest question you should ask yourself is, how can I get the attention? Because that's the reality of our business right now. There's so many more releases every week, and this will get more, I think. Actually sticking out of the noise is even more difficult. And so, yeah, it makes sense that many different, more or less successful titles try out different tactics, and we will see over the next years which of these are the most successful, I think. Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me, I would say, and I wonder if to which degree you agree to this, I would sort of say that there are only really 2 main tactics that you can use to get attention for your game. One is to have Steam do the marketing for you, and one is to have content creators do the marketing for you. And there are like different variations of both tactics, but that's kind of the 2 main options you have.
Yeah, I think that's a very good take. Yeah.
Okay.
There might be one additional thing though, But I think the impact of it is much more of a slow burn in a way. And that is if your game gets the press and the awards and people talking about it, and it's more like an organic recommendation thing. I think this can also work, but it might take longer, and it might not be as, like, the cycle might not be as quick as for hypey games or games that get pushed by Steam in a certain short phase or something.
I see. For example, one example that would fit into that category would, for example, be something like Outer Wilds, that didn't do particularly well with content creators. It also didn't do particularly well on store pages. But like, I keep recommending it to everyone, and it kind of spreads this way, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I see that. So let's say you start a completely new team or a new game project. Like, one commonality I see among successful devs, I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or not, is that they oftentimes seem to have very thought out workflows and processes. They're like, very rarely they're just doing random things and it somehow ends up working out. Like, what are the workflows that you feel are most likely to produce successful results?
So I think the first step for a studio, and that's one step that we already managed to overcome, is to overcome your naivety, I would say, and to actually understand what the reality of games is on the market. That's a thing that we notice a lot with young teams starting their first game, that they still have these expectations of what it could turn out to be. And that's the same thing that happened to me back with our VR game. Everybody told us, don't do a VR game. That's can't make money with it. And we were convinced that there are some examples for successful VR games, so we can also do it, basically. And that's the part that I mean, that you need to understand that what the players actually want. And like, for example, in our school, it was always a big topic to make something new and creative and different. But that doesn't really translate into success, I would say. So it's important to have this as a base, I would say. But if you want to have a successful game, it needs to have familiarity. So it can't be too different and too special, because then people don't understand what it is, and they can't compare it to other games. You don't really know where to put your marketing efforts, so on. So that's the first thing I would say. But that's a thing that we already kind of overcame.
Right. So what you're kind of saying is that a lot of devs go into the space with kind of almost the urge to be too unique, to stand out so much to the point that nobody really has something to compare your game to.
Either that, or I think the opposite is also true. Like, that's specifically from our circle, I would say, that like there's a lot of this innovation spirit. But I think it also happens that people start making games by just liking a game and then deciding they also want to do this type of game, basically. Sure. And that's the opposite spectrum, which is like too similar to games that are already out there. And that's also not really the formula for success, I would say, because then you're not adding anything new to the market. There's no reason to buy your game.
But then people hear what you just said and they're like, oh, I need to add something new to the market, and then they go overboard in the other direction. So you kind of have to hit that sweet spot, right?
It's a balance.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it's difficult. And then also, I feel like from looking back at all of these projects, I think one of the core things we think about is, if you see something from the game, a screenshot, a short video clip, something like this, and you can kind of imagine what the gameplay would feel like, or what you actually do in the game, even if you don't have a complete grasp of everything yet, that's a good indicator that you have something that's marketable. Because if you don't have this, there's a huge hurdle of actually understanding what the game is about. And for many players, in my opinion at least, this can quickly translate into, oh, I don't understand what it's about. It's probably not for me. And that's the worst thing that can happen. So the easier you make it for people to approach your game, the better. And this could also mean that the mechanics can be innovative and unheard of in a certain extent, and still you understand them quickly through the marketing material. Right? So I think that's kind of the caveat there.
It can be as innovative as you want, as long as you can easily communicate. It's kind of fine, right? But
I think so.
That's the problem with.
But that could also be a hot take. At least that's like what we learned, or at least that's the perspective we have now with the 5 years of experience on the market. Yeah.
I think, to be fair, the two things are highly related, right? I think if something's very complex and too innovative, then it's also usually gonna be difficult to explain it in a single screenshot or something.
Probably, yeah.
Like, I wonder, looking at like Starbirds versus Dorfromantik, if maybe this is also one thing that makes Starbirds a little more difficult, is that looking at the screenshots, it's not as obvious what it's about, right? Because if you look at Dorfromantik, it's like extremely obvious. It's a game about placing tiles and getting points based on how you place them. For Starbirds, it's not quite as trivial to figure out what it's about looking at the screenshots. I get you. I mean, you can still make a very, very good guess. Of course, it's like not horrible, but
I think so. I think it's actually a bit more difficult to market this game, definitely. And we did much more to market it. And of course, we have a big partner in the boat, and it didn't turn out as a much bigger hit than Dorfromantik was, right? So this is an interesting learning too.
It's also kind of frustrating from a developer perspective to see that the amount of effort you put into something doesn't exactly correlate with the amount of success it's gonna have. Does that kind of nudge you to make smaller games for your next projects again, or what are your thoughts so far?
I think generally we prefer to make smaller games just so that we can make more games. Because there's like, when you look at our prototyping phase, we have so many different ideas and so many different things that we would really like to see as a completed game at some point. And if you take 5 years for one game, that's just not happening. And then, of course, also the costs of making a long game is a big concern. So yeah, we try to keep the game smaller, but still, Starbirds took twice as long for the early access as Dorfromantik did. So we already extended our time frame quite a bit because it's just not really possible to make the kind of game that we wanted to make in 1 year for Starbirds. But I think for the future, we will definitely think about that again. Like, if we want to delve into genres or game systems that aren't really doable in 1 year of time. But there's still a discussion, because on the other hand, many interesting games just take this time to make. So if you need to restrict yourself too much, then that's also not quite what we want. We want to be able to realize our creative visions, and if they require more than Dorfromantik, then that's just how it is. I think, But generally, I think Starbirds was on the upper end of complexity of what game we want to make as a company.
Unless you grow way more, maybe you can do. But that's not your plan, from what I understand.
No, we're still keeping it small and growing slowly. Yeah, but still.
We just moved into a new office, by the way. So that's an exciting period right now. But we still don't plan on hiring more people. We want to have a well-oiled machine in a way. Now, machine is a bad word for it, but the team right now feels super good, and everybody is in a good place, I think. And so we want to keep it this way. So that's very valuable, and we're very thankful for it. So messing with this is maybe not a good idea.
And then the fact that you have a relatively lean team also takes a lot of stress and pressure off of your shoulders, right? Because you have not as high of a burn rate and you have a very long breath and you don't need every game to be like a mega success.
I mean, we talked about the prototyping that we did. And I think that's probably the main thing regarding our workflow is that we just try to do many different prototypes. And then probably the most important, like there are two more important steps. First is the step to evaluate your prototypes, which is a thing that we're getting better at, but there's still, I think the longer you make games and the more games you make, the better your judgment becomes when it comes to deciding what concept or what prototype actually has potential. And then the other thing is that after the prototype, there's always a phase of refining the prototype or like continuing the prototype. And at some point, you just need to know, you need to know what the game exactly will be. Because like the first prototype never has all the answers. So there's always some period of time after the initial prototype. And there the challenge is to find the right pacing, I think, to set your goals right so that you can decide what the game exactly is without taking years changing everything about the game.
You need to answer the correct questions at the correct time is also a bit what I'm hearing from your response there, right? It's probably a mistake to lock in everything from the very beginning, because if people hear what you just say and they're like, okay, sure, I'm gonna just start out by writing a game design document then that defines everything right away, that's probably also not the way to go, right?
No, definitely not. We are all about iterating over game design. So that's always what we want to do, because we think that's what results in the best games, so that that you don't lock in all the things from the beginning, but you keep on looking at the game, how it evolves, and are open to change things if needed. But that's also like a trap, right? That if you keep it open for too long, then it just stays in this vague state of being. And at some point, you need to find the right moment to say, this is good enough. This is like, this solution works well enough that it will turn out to be a good game in the end. Like there are still issues with it, but the issues aren't that detrimental to the game as a whole. And that's definitely another skill to master when developing games.
So yeah, I mean,
I think Jonas, your video with the fishing boat on the sea, where you talked about iteratively searching for different answers or different pathways, maybe in the development. That was a very good metaphor for how we work in a way. And I mean, we come from the same school, of course. You also studied at the HTW for a while, and I think this kind of core approach is similar in how we work too, and that's like a foundation for all the other stuff that we learned on the way.
Yeah. So also the prototyping as a very core concept of how you make games. It very much sounds like the prototyping and the way you evaluated those prototypes and so on sounds like it is was a big factor, at the very least for your success story. So, and I would also think that that's a good idea. Like I haven't met many people who are like, we did so much prototyping. That was such a waste of time. Like I've literally never heard that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just fun, right?
Yeah.
It's fun to do.
So I have kind of a spin-off question about that for you, which is like, recently I've been very much thinking about appeal prototyping, because I don't know, this is a bit of a hot take from my side, but I'm starting to feel like making a game that's fun is actually not the difficult part. As soon as you've made a couple of games and you have some experience with how to iterate, then you get sort of confident that you can make almost any game system fun with a couple of iterations. Like the tricky part seems to be the appeal side. So I'm wondering if maybe the correct approach for more experienced developers is to not start with gameplay prototypes, but to start with art and appeal prototypes. Do you think I'm crazy for thinking that, or is like, can you kind of see where I'm coming from?
No, I don't think it's crazy. I think it's a very, like, circling back to the question you asked me before, I think that's one of the approaches or perspectives you can have on that. I'm also kind of asking myself the same question for quite some time now, since in the last weeks, I don't know if you've seen Megabonk, for example,
Yes,
which
I've
is super successful.
I've played it, yes.
And in a way, you could say Megabonk or maybe also Paddle are games that are surprising, because in my book and in my perspective, when I look at these games, I'd say, okay, I don't think they are appealing in the classical sense of the art looks super well made, or they're super polished, or they're super aesthetic to look at, you know? And the appeal here might be something different then. And I don't really think you can say you could prototype such a game with an appeal as the goal. You know what I mean? So it's like so I'm kind of still on the fence of how I kind of,
I would say,
hard to say.
You mentioned, or you said appeal prototyping, but that doesn't really have to refer to the visuals only, right? I think it's, you also like this term, the player fantasy, right?
Yes.
And
yes,
that's
yes.
also the appeal. And it's really separate from the art style, I think. And I think that's really valid to give this part of the concept more room than, for example, the fun or the mechanics, because that's what draws people in. And if you have the skills to make an enjoyable game, which I agree with you that I think pretty much every idea can be made into an enjoyable game, not necessarily a successful one, but an enjoyable one. And I think if you manage to find a fantasy or a visual aesthetic or setting that's just super intriguing for people and start from there, I think that can work. But yeah, it's also pretty difficult, probably.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I also think it's difficult. I think what you said, making it intriguing, I think that's one of the important aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you look at appeal as something that's intriguing, then yes, I would say it's definitely a good approach, right, Jonas?
I mean, so the way I define appeal is like this general attraction force that upon seeing a screenshot or a short clip, you want to play it. And the problem with that definition of appeal is that it can have so many causes, right? It can be the art, it can be the fantasy, but what makes it kind of meaningless is that it can also be the gameplay, right? You can also see the gameplay of something and be like, oh, that gameplay looks really fun. I kind of want to play that. And that makes, not sure if that definition of appeal is almost so universal that it makes it useless. Yeah, it's difficult. I agree.
We had an interesting conversation recently with our team about the appeal of Star Birds, actually, because we also think that it doesn't, like, there's more potential there. Let's just frame it that way. And one discussion point was that, like, Kurzgesagt videos always have these huge scenarios, like these big topics, big existential topics of black holes and nuclear bombs and all these kind of things.
You get always, after watching a video, always have this feeling of existential dread, almost,
And I think, like, that's a really dramatic type of entertainment, like a really high tension type of entertainment. And like one opinion about Star Wars in our team was that our game doesn't really have this level of tension that the videos have, but that's also like a thing that you, like, if you want this type of tension to be the appeal of your game, then that needs to be a decision early in development, because your whole system builds on that. Like, we can't just introduce something crazy asteroid destroying at this stage of the game. It's just, I would say it's too late for that, but that's just one other example of appeal that you can define early on if you want to. I think we went more in the Dorfromantik appeal kind of way, that we were like, yeah, we want to make a factory building game, but it looks nice, it's inviting, it looks colorful, vibrant, and it has this toy character that it's just satisfying to place down things. And that's the appeal that we went for as a different direction. But it's also a direction that we defined really early on, that's what we want to achieve. Yeah, but now after our release and after spending all this time with the game, we definitely look at I think we learned a lot from that again for the next project. Things to consider in this early stage where we define the appeal.
Do you think you were maybe too gameplay focused in the early phase, or did you already think a lot about like appeal and marketability for this project?
I think in general we are really systemic people. Like we really enjoy game mechanics as a team, and so. But we also, like, the visuals definitely also played a role right from the beginning.
Sure. Yeah, of course, because you need to nail that entire look and so on, obviously.
What we maybe don't do that much is because we're not really narrative people. So we don't think that much about what story the game tells. And I think that's what with the dramatic example earlier, I think that goes more in that direction, actually, that you have some story or some events happening in your game, and that you focus your appeal on that. And I think that's maybe one part where we can still learn to get a better judgment.
Timo, what were you about to say? Or was it sort of...
Yeah, I just wanted to say maybe in the future, so because we knew a certain visual style would need to be a focus of the game too, right? The aesthetic, the vibe and so on. This kind of also maybe limited the way we approached the game a little bit. And of course, constraints are always good. It's always helpful to have a certain framework to fit your game into. But on the other hand, before, we usually always had the prototype, the core game loop first before tackling the visuals, the setting, the theme, and so on, which then really matched well to the gameplay. And here we had to fit two parts that were already there together in a way. And this was a challenge. And in the future, I think we will go back to how we did it before.
Okay, got it. I've found also the examples you gave quite interesting, like games like Megabonk or Vampire Survivors, and wondering how you would plan for that type of appeal. That's a very good question. Like, I think for games like those, it's often also the power fantasy, and you can
the game feel,
you can still kind of see that in the screenshots in a way, right? So you can kind of see, okay, this is there's like one dude in the middle and it's surrounded by enemies, so you kind of intuitively understand there's like a power fantasy type of game.
Yeah, I think that screenshot you just described is just super inherently appealing to everyone.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it's really not the beautifulness or the beauty of the art style. I think that's not necessarily anymore the thing we are looking for. Yeah. And I think the market shows that that's not the criteria.
One thing that I found very impressive about Megabonk, I'm not sure, have you played it a bit as well?
Not yet, to be honest. But
it's okay.
I'm always looking at Let's Plays and so on. Yeah.
One thing that really impressed me is how they polished everything that really matters, like all of the combat, all of the movement, all of the feedback is like extremely polished. And then the things that don't matter, they just left in very, very raw, right? For example, the characters, they don't even have an attack animation. You just walk around, Like the attack is just a pixelated sprite that spawns in front of you. It's just like whatever. Like, yeah, it's a very interesting approach.
I mean, if it works, it works.
No, I found it very inspiring, to be honest.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, there was another good tangent that we started there. Cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jonas.
Yes, it was really fun.
Thanks for having us.